Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Book 8, Story 12, Patacara Theri. Patacara, we are told, was a daughter of a wealthy merchant of Sarathy. Her father was worth 400 millions, and she was exceedingly beautiful. When she was about 16 years old, her parents provided quarters for her in a palace 7 stories high, and there they kept her on the topmost floor, surrounded by guards. But in spite of these precautions, she misconducted herself, and it was with her own page. Now it so happened that her father and mother had promised her in marriage to a certain young man who was her social equal. And finally they set the wedding day. And the day was close at hand. She said to the page, "My parents tell me that they intend to give me in marriage to a young man who comes of such and such a family. Now you know very well that when I am once inside of my husband's house, you may bring me presents and come to see me all you like, but you will never get in. Therefore, if you really love me, don't delay an instant, but find some way or other of getting me out of this place." "Very well, my love. This is what I will do. Tomorrow, early in the morning, I will go to the city gate and wait for you at such and such a spot. You manage somehow or other to get out of this place and meet me there." On the following day he went to the appointed place and waited. Patacara got up very early in the morning, put on soiled garments, dishevelled her hair, and smeared her body with red powder. Then, in order to outwit her keepers, she took a water pot in her hand, surrounded herself with slave maidens, and set out as if she intended to fetch water. Escaping from the palace, she went to the appointed place and met her lover. Together they went a long way off and took up their abode in a certain village. The husband tilled the soil and gathered firewood and leaves in the forest. The wife fetched water in her water pot, and with her own hand pounded the rice, did the cooking, and performed the other household duties. Thus did Patacara reap the fruit of her own sin. By and by she became pregnant, and when the time for her delivery was near at hand, she made the following request to her husband: "Here I have no one to help me, but a mother and father always have a soft spot in their heart for their child. Therefore, take me home to them, that I may give birth to my child in their house." But her husband refused her request, saying to her, "My dear wife, what say you? If your mother and father were to see me, they would subject me to all manner of tortures. It is out of the question for me to go. Over and over again she begged him, and each time he refused her. One day when her husband was away in the forest, she went to the neighbors and said, "Should my husband ask you where I have gone when he returns, tell him that I have gone home to my parents." And having so said, she closed the door of her house and went away. When her husband returned and observed that she was not there, he inquired of the neighbors, and they told him what had happened. "I must persuade her to return," thought he, and set out after her. Finally, he caught sight of her, and overtaking her, begged her to return with him. But try as he might, he was unable to persuade her to do so. When they reached a certain place, the birth pains came upon her. Said she to her husband, "Husband, the birth pains are come upon me." So saying, she made her way into a clump of bushes, laid herself upon the ground, and there, with much tossing about and pain, she gave birth to her son. Then she said, "What I set out to go home for is over." So back again to their house she went with him, and once more they lived together. After a time she became pregnant again. When the time for her delivery was at hand, she made the same request of her husband as before, and received the same answer. So she took her child upon her hip and went away just as she had before. Her husband followed her, overtook her, and asked her to return with him. This she refused to do. Now as they went on their way, a fearful storm arose out of due season. The sky was ablaze with flashes of lightning, and rent asunder, as it were, with thunderclaps, and there was an incessant downpour of rain. At that moment the birth pains came upon her. She said to her husband, "Husband, the birth pains are come upon me. I cannot stand it. Find me a place out of the rain." Her husband went hither and thither, axe in hand, seeking materials for a shelter. Seeing some brushwood growing on the top of an anthill, he set about to chop it down. Hardly had he begun his work, when a poisonous snake slipped out of the anthill and bit him. Instantly his body was burnt up, as it were, by flames of fire shooting up within him. His flesh turned purple, and in the place wherein he stood, there he fell down dead. Patacara, suffering intense pain, watched for her husband to return, but in vain. Finally she gave birth to a second son. The two children, unable to withstand the buffeting of the wind and the rain, screamed at the top of their lungs. The mother took them to her bosom, and crouching upon the ground with her hands and knees pressed together, remained in this posture all night long. Her whole body looked as though there were no blood left in it, and her flesh had the appearance of a sere and yellow leaf. When the dawn arose, she took her newborn son, his flesh as red as a piece of meat, and placed him on her hip. Then she gave the older boy one of her fingers to hold, and with the words, "Come, dear child, your father has left us, set out along the same path her husband had taken." When she came to the ant hill, there on top of it she saw her husband lying dead, his flesh purple, his body rigid. "All on account of me," said she. "My husband has died upon the road." And wailing and lamenting, she continued her journey. When she came to the river Achiravati, she observed that by reason of the rain which had lasted all night long, the river was swollen knee-deep, and in places waist-deep. She was too weak to wade across the stream with the two children. Therefore she left the older boy on the near bank and carried the younger across to the far side, breaking off a branch of a tree and spreading it out, she laid the child on it. Then thinking to herself, "I must return to my other child," she took leave of the younger boy and turned to recross the stream. But she could hardly bring herself to leave the little one, and again she turned around to look at him. She had barely reached midstream when a hawk caught sight of the child, and mistaking him for a piece of meat, swooped down from the sky after him. The mother, seeing the hawk swoop down after the child, raised both her hands and screamed with a loud voice, "Be gone! Be gone! Su! Su!" 3 times she screamed, but the hawk was so far away that he failed to hear her, and seizing the boy, flew up into the air with him. When the older boy, who had been left on the near bank, saw his mother stop in the middle of the river and raise her hands, and heard her scream with a loud voice, he thought to himself, "She is calling me." And in his haste he fell into the water. In this wise was her younger son carried off by a hawk, and her older son swept away by the river. And she wailed and lamented, saying, "One of my sons has been carried off by a hawk, the other swept away by the water. By the roadside my husband lies dead." Thus wailing and lamenting, she went on her way. As she proceeded on her way, she met a certain man coming from Savatthi. She asked him, "Sir, where do you live?" "In Savatthi, my good woman." "In the city of Savatthi, in such and such a street lives such a family. Do you know them, sir?" "Yes, my good woman, I know them. But pray, don't ask me about that family. Ask me about any other family you know." "Sir, I have no occasion to ask about any other. This is the only family I wish to ask about." "Woman, You give me no opportunity to avoid telling you. Did you observe that it rained all last night? Indeed, I did, sir. In fact, I am the only person the rain fell on all night long. How it came to rain on me, I will tell you by and by. But just tell me, what has happened to the family of this wealthy merchant? And I will ask you no further questions. My good woman, last night the storm overturned that house, and it fell on the merchant and his wife and his son, and they perished, all three, and their neighbors and kinsmen are even now burning their bodies on one funeral pyre. Look there, my good woman, you can see the smoke now. Instantly she went mad. Her clothing fell off from her body, but she knew not that she was naked. Naked as at her birth, she wandered round and round, weeping and wailing and lamenting. Both my sons are dead. My husband on the road lies dead. My mother and father and brother burn on one funeral pyre. Those who saw her yelled, "Crazy fool! Crazy fool!" Some flung rubbish at her. Others showered dust on her head. Others pelted her with clods of earth. It so happened that this time the teacher was in residence at Jetavana monastery. As he sat there in the midst of his disciples preaching the Dhamma, he saw Patacara approach from afar and recognized in her one who for 100,000 aeons of time had fulfilled the perfections, one who had made her earnest wish and attained it. We are told that in the dispensation of the Buddha, Padumuttara, she had seen the teacher, Padumuttara, taken a certain nun by the arm and assign her preeminence among those that are versed in the Vinaya of canon law. It seemed as if the teacher were opening the heaven of Indra and admitting this nun to the garden of delight. So she formed her resolve and made this prayer: "May I also obtain from a Buddha, like you, preeminence among nuns, versed in the canon law." The Buddha Padumuttara, extending his consciousness into the future and perceiving that her prayer would be fulfilled, made the following prophecy. In the dispensation of a Buddha to be known as Gotama, this woman will bear the name Patacara and will obtain preeminence among nuns versed in the canon law. So when the teacher beheld Patacara approaching from afar, her prayer fulfilled, her earnest wish attained, and he said, "There is none other that can be a refuge to this woman, but only I." And he caused her to draw near to the monastery. The moment his disciples saw her, they cried out, "Suffer not that crazy woman to come hither." But he said to them, "Depart from me, forbid her not. And when she was come nigh, he said to her, Sister, return to your right mind. Instantly, through the psychic power of the Buddha, she returned to her right mind. At the same moment, she became aware that her clothing had fallen from off her body, and recovering at once her sense of modesty and fear of mortal sin, she crouched upon the ground. A certain man threw her his cloak. She put it on, and approaching the teacher, prostrated herself before his golden feet with the 5 rests. Having so done, she said, Venerable sir, be thou my refuge, be thou my support. One of my sons has been carried off by a hawk, the other swept away by the water. By the roadside my husband lies dead. My father's house has been wrecked by the wind, and in it have perished my mother and father and brother. And even now their bodies are burning on one funeral pyre. Their teacher listened to what she had to say and replied, Patacara, be no more troubled. Thou art come to one that is able to be thy shelter, thy defense, thy refuge. What thou hast said is true. One of thy sons has been carried off by a hawk, the other swept away by the water. By the roadside thy husband lies dead. Thy father's house has been wrecked by the wind, and in it have perished thy mother, father, and brother. But just as today, so also all through this round of existences, thou hast wept over the loss of sons and others dear to thee, shedding tears more abundant than the waters of the 4 oceans. And he uttered the following stanza. But little water do the oceans 4 contain, compared with all the tears that men have shed. By sorrow smitten and by suffering distraught, woman, why heedless dost thou still remain? In this wise did the teacher discourse on the round of existences, without conceivable beginning. As he spoke, the grief which pervaded her body became less dense. Perceiving that her grief was become less dense, he continued his discourse as follows. Patacara, the one that is on his way to the world beyond, nor sons nor other kith and kin can ever be a shelter or a refuge. How much less can you expect them to be such to you in this present life? He that is wise should clarify his conduct, and so for himself make clear the path that leadeth to Nibbana. So saying, he instructed her in the Dhamma by pronouncing the following stanzas. Nor sons nor father can a refuge be, nor kith and kin to him whom death assaults. No refuge is to be found anywhere, kinsman. Knowing this fact, the wise men, restrained by the moral precepts, should straightway clear the path that leads to Nibbana. At the conclusion of the discourse, Patacara obtained the fruit of conversion, and the defilements within her, as numerous as the particles of dust on the whole wide earth, were burned away. Many others likewise obtained the fruit of conversion and the fruits of the second and third paths. Patacara, having obtained the fruit of conversion, requested the teacher to admit her to the order. The teacher sent her to the community of nuns and directed that she be admitted. Afterwards, she made her full profession, and by reason of her happy demeanor, Patacara came to be known as Patacara. One day, she filled her water pot with water, and pouring out water, bathed her feet. As she poured out the water, she spilled some on the ground. The water ran a little way and disappeared. The second time it went a little farther. The third time a little farther yet. So she took this very incident for a subject of meditation, and fixing accurately in her mind the three occurrences, she meditated thus: even as the water I spilled the first time ran a little way and disappeared, so also living beings here in the world are dying in youth. Even as the water I spilled the second time ran a little farther, so also living beings here in the world are dying in the prime of life. Even as the water I spilled the third time ran a little farther yet, so also living beings here in the world are dying in old age. The teacher, seated in his perfumed chamber, sent forth an apparition of himself, and standing as it were face to face with her, spoke and said, Patacara, to a better far to live, but a single day, aye, but a single moment, and see the rise and fall of the five elements of being, than to live 100 years and not see. And joining the connection, he instructed her in the Dhamma by pronouncing the following stanza: though one should live 100 years, 'twere all in vain, if one not see that all is both wax and wane. Instead, 'twere better far to live a single day, and know that all the world contains both rise and pass away. At the conclusion of the discourse, Patacara attained arahatship together with the supernatural faculties. Book 8, Story 13, Kisa, Gotani Theri. Once in Savatthi lived a girl named Gotami. But because she was lean, they called her Kisa Gotami. Kisa Gotami married a merchant's son. After some time, she became pregnant and gave birth to her son. When the son was just able to walk, he fell sick and died. Now Kisa Gotami had never seen death before. Therefore, when they came to remove the body for burning, she forbade them to do so. Said she to herself, I will seek medicine for my son. Placing the dead child on her hip, she went from house to house inquiring, Know ye aught that will cure my son? Everyone said to her, Woman, thou art stark mad, that thou goest from house to house seeking medicine for thy dead child. But she went away thinking, Surely I shall find someone that knoweth medicine for my child. Now a certain wise man saw her and thought to himself, This my daughter hath no doubt borne and lost her first and only child, nor death hath seen before. I must help her. So he said to her, Woman, as for me, I know not that wherewith to cure your child. But one there is that knoweth, and him I know. Sir, who is it that doth know? Woman, the teacher doth know. Go, ask him. Good sir, I will go and ask him. So she went to the teacher, paid obeisance to him, stood at his side and asked him, Venerable sir, is it true as men say that thou dost know that wherewith to cure my child? Yeah, that I know. What shall I get? A pinch of white mustard seed. That will I, venerable sir. But in whose house shall I get it? In whose house son nor daughter nor any other hath yet died? Very well, venerable sir, said she, and paid obeisance to him. Then she placed the dead child on her hip, entered the village, stopped at the door of the very first house and asked, Have ye here any white mustard seed? They say, It will cure my child. Yeah, well then give it to me. They brought grains of white mustard seed and gave to her. She asked, Friends, in the house wherein ye dwell, hath son or daughter yet died? What sayest thou, woman? As for the living, they be few, only the dead be many. Well then, take back your mustard seed. There is no medicine for my child. So saying, she gave back the mustard seed. After this manner, going from house to house, she plied her quest. Never a house wherein she found the mustard seed she sought. And when the evening came, she thought, "Ah, 'tis a heavy task I took upon myself. I thought 'twas I alone had lost a child, but in every village the dead are more in number than the living." The while she thus reflected, hard became the heart, which before was soft with mother's love. She took the child and in a forest laid him down, and going to the teacher, paid obeisance to him, and beside him took her stand. Said the teacher, "Didst thou get the single pinch of mustard seed?" "Nay, that did I not, venerable sir. In every village the dead are more in number than the living," said the teacher. "Vainly didst thou imagine that thou alone hadst lost a child. But all living beings are subject to an unchanging law, and it is this: the Prince of Death, like to a raging torrent, sweeps away into the sea of ruin all living beings. Still are their longings unfulfilled." And instructing her in the Dhamma, he pronounced the following stanza: "Whoso hath set his heart on sons of flocks and herds, to worldly pleasures given o'er, even as a torrent sweeps away a sleeping town, so him the Prince of Death doth take and bear away." As the teacher uttered the last word of the stanza, Kisa Gotami was established in the fruit of conversion. Likewise did many others also obtain the fruit of conversion and the fruits of the second and third paths. Kisa Gotami requested the teacher to admit her to the order. Accordingly, he sent her to the community of nuns and directed that she be admitted. Afterwards, she made her full profession and came to be known as the nun Kisa Gotami. One day it was her turn to light the lamp in the hall of confession. Having lighted the lamp, she sat down and watched the tongues of flame. Some flared up and others flickered out. She took this for her subject of meditation and meditated as follows: "Even as it is with these flames, so also is it with living beings here in the world. Some flare up, while others flicker out. They only that have reached Nibbana are no more seen." The teacher, seated in his perfumed chamber, sent forth an apparition of himself, and standing as it were face to face with her, spoke consider. Even as it is with these flames, so also is it with living beings here in the world. Some flare up, while others flicker out. The only that have reached Nibbana are no more seen. Therefore, better is the life of him that seeth Nibbana, though he live but for an instant, than the lives of them that endure for 100 years and yet see not Nibbana. And joining the connection, he instructed her in the Dhamma by pronouncing the following stanza. Though one should live 100 years, the deathless never seeing, to live a single day, the deathless being. At the conclusion of the discourse, Gita Gotami, even as she sat there, attained arahatship and the supernatural faculties. Book 9, Story 1, Brahman, Single Robe. For in the dispensation of the Buddha Vipassi lived a Brahman named Maha Ekasataka, and he it was who was reborn in the present dispensation in Savatthi as one robe, Kulla Ekasataka. For Kulla Ekasataka possessed but a single undergarment, and his wife possessed but a single undergarment, and both of them together possessed but a single upper garment. Result was that whenever either the Brahman or his wife went out of doors, the other had to stay at home. One day, announcement was made that there would be a preaching at the monastery. Said the Brahman to his wife, "Wife, announcement is made that there will be preaching at the monastery. Will you go to hear the Dhamma by day or by night? For we have not enough upper garments between us to permit both of us to go together." The Brahman's wife replied, "Husband, I will go in the daytime." So saying, she put on the upper garment and went. The Brahman spent the day at home. At night he went to the monastery, seated himself in front of the teacher and listened to the Dhamma. As he listened to the Dhamma, the 5 sorts of joy arose within him, suffusing his body. He greatly desired to do honor to the teacher, but the following thought restrained him. If I give this garment to the teacher, there will be no upper garment left for my wife or me. 1,000 selfish thoughts arose within him. Then a single believing thought arose within him. Then thought of self arose within him and overmastered the believing thought. Even so did the mighty thought of self seize, as it were, and bind and thrust out the believing thought. I will give it. No, I will not give it, said the Brahman to himself. As he thus reflected, the first watch passed and the second watch arrived. Even then, he was not able to bring himself to give the garment to the teacher. And the last watch came. Finally, the Brahman thought to himself, "Well, I have been fighting with thoughts of faith and thoughts of sorrow. 2 watches have elapsed. If these powerful thoughts of self increase, they will not permit me to lift up my head on the false states of suffering. I will therefore give my gift. Thus the Brahman finally overmastered 1,000 thoughts of self and followed the lead of a sort of faith. Taking his garment, he laid it at the teacher's feet and thrice cried out with a loud voice, I have conquered! I have conquered! King Pasanadi Kosala happened to be listening to the Dhamma. When he heard that cry, he said, ask him what he has conquered. The king's men asked the Brahman the question, and the Brahman explained the matter to them. When the king heard the explanation, he said, it was a hard thing to do what the Brahman did. I will do him a kindness. So he caused a pair of garments to be presented to him. The Brahman presented these garments also to the Tathagata. Then the king doubled his gift, presenting the Brahman first with 2 pairs of garments, then with 4, then with 8, finally with 16. The Brahman presented all these garments also to the Tathagata. Then the king directed 32 pairs of garments to be presented to the Brahman. But to avoid having it said, the Brahman has kept not a single pair for himself, but has given away every pair he received. He said to the Brahman, keep 1 pair for yourself and give another pair to your wife. So saying, he caused the Brahman to keep 2 pairs and gave the remaining 32 pairs to the Tathagata alone. He said to the Brahman, keep 1 pair for yourself and give another pair to your wife. So saying, he caused the Brahman to keep 2 pairs and gave the remaining 32 pairs to the Tathagata alone. Even had the Brahman given away what he possessed 100 times, the king would have met his gifts with equal gifts. In a former state of existence, Maha Ekasataka kept for himself 2 pairs of garments out of 64 he received. Kulla Ekasataka kept 2 out of 32. The king gave orders to his men. It was indeed a hard thing to do what the Brahman did. Fetch my 2 blankets into the presence chamber. They did so. The king presented him with the 2 blankets, valued at 1,000 pieces of money. But the Brahman said to himself, I am not worthy to cover my body with these blankets. These are suitable only for the religion of the Buddha. Accordingly, he made a canopy of 1 of the blankets and hung it up in the perfumed chamber over the teacher's bed. Likewise he made a canopy of the other blanket and hung it up in his own house over the spot where the monk who resorted to his house for alms took his meals. In the evening, the king went to visit the teacher. Recognizing the blanket, he asked him, "Reverend sir, who was it that honored you with the gift of this blanket?" "Ekasataka," thought the king to himself, "even as I believe and rejoice in my belief, even so does this Brahman believe and rejoice in his belief." Accordingly, he presented to him 4 elephants, 4 horses, 4,000 pieces of money, 4 women, 4 female slaves, and 4 most excellent villages. Thus, therefore, did the king cause the Brahman to be given the gift of force. The monks started a discussion in the hall of truth. Oh, how wonderful was the deed of Kulla Ekasataka! No sooner than he received all manner of presents of four. As soon as he did a good deed, straightway the fruit thereof was given to him. Their teacher approached and asked the monks, "Monks, what are you sitting here now talking about?" When they told him, he said, "Monks, had Ekasataka been able to bring himself to give me his gift in the first watch, he would have received the gift of 16s. Had he been able to do so in the middle watch, he would have received the gift of 8s, because it was not until late in the last watch that he gave me his gift. He received only the gift of force. He who does good works should not put away the impulse to good that arises within him, but should act on the instant. A meritorious deed, tardily done, brings its reward, but tardy is the reward it brings. Therefore a man should perform a good work the instant the impulse to good arises within him. So saying, he joined the connection, and preaching the Dhamma pronounced the following stanza: "Let a man make haste to do good. Let him restrain his heart from evil. For if a man is slow in doing good, his mind delights in evil." Book 9, Story 9, The Hunter and the Monk. The story goes that one day, early in the morning, as Koka was on his way to the forest with bow in hand and a pack of hounds trailing after him, he met by the wayside a certain monk entering a village for alms. The sight of the monk angered him. As he continued on his way, he thought to himself, "I have met a Jonah. I shall get nothing today." As for the elder, when he had made his round of the village and eaten his breakfast, he set out to return to the monastery. Likewise the hunter, who had scoured the forest without bagging any game, set out on his return journey. Seeing the elder again, the hunter thought to himself, "Early this morning I met this Jonah, went to the forest and got nothing. Now he bobs up again before my very eyes. I will let my dogs eat him up." So he gave the word to his dogs and set them on the elder. As for the elder, he begged the hunter for mercy, saying, "Do not so, lay disciple, I pray you." The hunter replied, "Early this morning I met you face to face, and because of you I got nothing in the forest. Now you bob up again before my very eyes. I will let my dogs eat you up. And that is all I have to say." So saying, the hunter set his dogs on the elder. Without more ado, the elder climbed a certain tree in haste and settled himself in a fork of the tree, a man's height from the ground. The dogs closed around the tree. The hunter Koka accompanied the dogs to the tree and said to the elder, "Don't delude yourself with the thought that you have escaped from my clutches merely by climbing a tree." And forthwith he pierced the sole of one of the elder's feet with the point of an arrow. Again the elder begged the hunter for mercy, saying, "Do not so, I pray you." The hunter, however, paid no attention to the elder's entreaty, but pierced the sole of the elder's foot again and again with the point of the arrow. When the sole of one of the elder's feet had been pierced through and through, he drew up the wounded foot and let his other foot hang down. When the sole of that foot had been pierced through and through, he drew that foot up also. And the hunter had thus pierced through and through the soles of both the elder's feet, in spite of the elder's entreaties. The elder felt as though his body had been set on fire with torches. So intense was the pain he suffered that he was unable any longer to fix his attention. The robe which he wore as an outer garment dropped from his body, but he did not even notice that it had fallen. When the robe dropped from the elder's body, it fell upon the hunter Koka, covering him from head to foot. "The elder has fallen out of the tree," thought the dogs. Forthwith they crept in under the robe, dragged out their own master, and devoured him, leaving only the bare bones. Once out from under the folds of the robe, the dogs stood and waited. The first thing they knew, the elder broke off a dry stick and threw it at them. The moment the dogs saw the elder, they thought, "We have eaten our own master," and straightway they scurried off into the forest. The elder was greatly perplexed and disturbed. Thought he to himself, The hunter lost his life because my robe fell and covered him. Is my innocence still unimpaired? With this thought in his mind, he slipped down from the tree, went to the teacher and told him the whole story, beginning at the beginning. "Reverend sir," said he, "it was all because of my robe that this hunter lost his life. Is my innocence still unimpaired? Am I still a monk?" The teacher listened to the elder's word and replied, "Monk, your innocence is still unimpaired. You are still a monk. It is he who offended against the offenseless that has gone to perdition. Moreover, this is not the first time he has done this very thing. In a previous state of existence also he offended against the offenseless, went to perdition for it." And when the teacher had thus spoken, he illustrated the matter further by relating the following story of the past. Wicked physician, boys, and poisonous snake. The story goes that in times long past, a certain physician made the rounds of a village, seeking employment for his services. Finding none, and overcome with hunger, he departed from that village. As he passed out of the village gate, he noticed a throng of little boys laying about the gate. As soon as the physician saw them, he thought to himself, "I will let a snake bite these boys, then I will treat their wounds. Thus I shall obtain food for myself." Accordingly, he pointed to a snake that lay in the hole of a certain tree with his head thrust out and said to the boys, "Boys, there is a young salika bird. Catch him." One of the boys immediately gripped the snake firmly by the neck and dragged him out of his hole. But as soon as he discovered that he had a snake in his hand, he screamed and threw the snake on the head of the physician, who stood close by. The snake coiled about the shoulders of the physician, bit him hard, and then and there killed him. Thus concluded the teacher, in a previous state of existence also this hunter Koka offended against the offenseless and went to perdition for it. When the teacher had related this story of the past, he joined the connection and, preaching the Dhamma, pronounced the following stanza: "Whoever harms a harmless person, one pure and guiltless, upon that very fool the evil recoils like fine dust thrown against the wind." Book 9, Story 10. The Jeweler, the Monk, and the Heron. An elder Kisa, it seems, had taken his meals in the house of a certain jeweler for 12 years. and the master and mistress of the household had ministered to his wants as faithfully as a mother or father might do. Now one day the jeweler sat chopping some meat, and the elders sat before him. At that moment King Patsanadi Kosala sent a certain precious stone to the jeweler together with the following message: clean it, pierce it, and send it back. The jeweler, although his hands were covered with blood, took the stone in his hand and placed it in a jewel box. Then he went into an inner room to wash his hands. Now the jeweler had a pet heron in his house, and the heron, concluding from the smell of blood that the jewel must be a piece of meat, swallowed the jewel before the very eyes of the elder. When the jeweler returned and discovered that the jewel had disappeared, he asked his wife and his sons in turn, "Did you take the jewel?" "Indeed, we did not take it," they replied. The jeweler immediately concluded, "The elder must have taken it," and whispered to his wife, "The elder must have taken the jewel." His wife replied, "Husband, say not so. During all the years the elder has visited this house, I have never observed a flaw in him. It was not he that took the jewel." Then the jeweler asked the elder, "Reverend sir, did you take a precious stone in this place?" "No, lay disciple, I did not take it." "Reverend sir, there was nobody else here. You and you alone must have taken the jewel. Give me back the precious stone." Since the elder steadfastly refused to admit that he had taken the jewel, the jeweler said to his wife, "It must have been the elder that took the jewel. I will question him even by torture. Husband, do not ruin us. It were better far for us to become slaves than to lay such a charge at the door of the elder." But the jeweler replied, "Were all of us to become slaves, we should not bring the price of that jewel." The jeweler took a rope, bound the head of the elder, and beat him on the head with a stick. Blood streamed from the elder's head, ears, and nostrils, and his eyes looked as though they would pop out of his sockets. Overwhelmed with the pain, the elder fell prostrate on the ground. The heron, sniffing the blood, approached the elder and began to drink the blood. At this the jeweler, beside himself with anger at the elder, screamed, "What are you doing here?" and kicked the heron out of the way. But a single blow sufficed to kill the heron, and he turned over on his back. When the elder saw that, he said to the jeweler, "Lay disciple, just slacken the rope about my head and see whether the heron is dead or not. The jeweler answered him, You also will die just as has this heron. Lay disciple, it was this heron that swallowed that jewel. However, had not the heron died, I would sooner have died myself than have told you what became of the jewel. The jeweler immediately ripped open the crop of the heron, and the first thing he saw was the jewel. Thereupon he trembled in every limb. His heart palpitated with excitement, and flinging himself at the feet of the elder, said, Pardon me, Reverend Sir, what I did in my ignorance. Lay disciple, replied the elder, it was not your fault at all, and neither was it my fault. The round of existence alone is to blame for this. I pardon you freely. Reverend Sir, if it is really true that you have pardoned me, then pray, take your accustomed seat in my house once more, and accept alms at my hands. Lay disciple, I shall not henceforth set foot under the roof of anybody's house. My present life is the result of entering other men's houses. From this time forth, whithersoever my feet may carry me, I shall receive alms only when standing at the house door. Thus did the elder speak, taking upon himself one of the pure precepts. And when he had thus spoken, he pronounced the following stanza. Food is cooked for the sage, a little here and a little there, in one house after another. I will journey about on my round for alms. A good stout leg is mine. But not long after the elder had spoken these words, he passed into Nibbana as the result of the beating he had received at the hands of the jeweler. The heron was reborn in the womb of the jeweler's wife. When the jeweler died, he was reborn in hell. When the jeweler's wife died, she was reborn because of her soft-heartedness towards the elder in the world of the gods. The monks asked the teacher about their future state. Said the teacher, monks, of living beings here in this world, some re-enter the womb. Others who are evildoers go to hell. Others who have done good deeds go to the world of the gods, while they that have rid themselves of the contaminations pass into Nibbana. So saying, he joined the connection and preaching the Dhamma pronounced the following stanza. Some are reborn on earth. Evildoers go to hell. The righteous go to heaven. Arahats, pass into Nibbana. Book 10, Story 10. Teacher, Red Garment. For one day, Elder Anda saw a certain youth going along, clad in a ragged undergarment, with a potsherd in his hand. Said the elder to the youth, "Is not the monastic life superior to the kind of life you lead?" Said the youth to the elder, "Reverend sir, who will make a monk of me?" "I will make a monk of you," said the elder. So taking him with him, he bathed him with his own hand, and giving him a subject of meditation, made a monk of him. Now the youth spread out the cloth which he had worn as an undergarment, looked about him, and seeing no place to which he might resort for the purpose of straining water, placed the cloth and the potsherd on the branch of a certain tree. Having been admitted to the order, and having made his full profession, he enjoyed to the full the rich offerings which accrue to the Buddhas, and went about clad in robes of great price. After a time he became fat and discontented. Thought he to himself, "What is the use of my going about clad in robes, which are the pious offerings of the people? I will clothe myself once more in the same old cloth I used to wear." Accordingly, he went to the place where he had left the cloth and recovered it. Having so done, he said to himself, "You shameless, unblushing simpleton, you have thrown away the privilege of wearing rich apparel. Have clothed yourself in these rags, and with potsherd in hand are about to go forth for arms." And taking this thought for his subject of meditation, all by himself he admonished himself. Now, even as he admonished himself, his mind became tranquil. Then and there he put away that cloth and went back again to the monastery. After a few days, however, he became discontented once more, said the same thing to himself, and then went back again to the monastery. Again, the third time, the same thing happened. When the monks saw him going back and forth in this manner, they asked him, "Brother, where are you going?" "I am going to my teacher, brethren," he replied. Thus did he take his own old ragged garment for his subject of meditation. By this means conquer himself, and in a few days attain arahatship. Said the monks, "Brother, do you no longer go to your teacher?" "This is not the path you have been accustomed to travel, brethren," replied the monk. "When I was attached to the world, I walked with a teacher, but now that I have cut off the ties that bind me to the world, I no longer go to him." The monks reported the matter to the teacher, saying, Reverend sir, the elder Pilotika does not speak the truth. What did he say, monk? Replied the teacher. He said this and that, Reverend sir. When the teacher heard that, he said, Monks, what he says is quite true. When my son was attached to the world, he went to a teacher. But now he has cut off the ties that bound him to the world, has himself restrained himself, and has attained arahatship. So saying, he pronounced the following stanzas. Those who are ashamed to do shameful things are rare. Such men can be compared to a thoroughbred horse who does not get whipped. A man who practices virtue, who has confidence in what he does, who meditates and who understands the Dhamma, such a man will get rid of suffering, as a thoroughbred horse gets rid of being whipped.